Welcome to the 4th episode of the Join Us at the Bar podcast.
We're here for you.
I am Lisa Hanson. We are your co-hosts.
I'm Haley Bohlmann.
And this podcast is brought to you as a production of the Communications Department of the Iowa State Bar Association.
Yes, and please subscribe for lighthearted conversation covering topics impacting the law and the legal profession every other month.
Our episode this time will be focused on the theme of employment law.
Yes, and if you enjoyed the previous episodes, please hit that subscribe button.
Oh, you know what we do need to remind them? Not attorneys. We are not attorneys. One quick disclosure, because we're talking to a lot of attorneys, we are not them. But we hope that they love us.
Yes, and please don't misconstrue any of this as legal advice. Consult your professional attorney. Quick shout out to a subscriber who's provided us feedback. Heather Anderson is the co-owner of Anderson Modern Workshop, and she's been a loyal listener and supporter. So thank you so much, Heather. We really appreciate your feedback.
Yes, we look forward to hearing from Heather and all of you each month. So don't hesitate to give a shout out, whether it's good or bad. I mean, of course it's gonna be good, but we do look forward to hearing from you. We welcome your comments. Now, on the outside chance that this is your first episode, we kind of like to go through the typical rundown of what we do each podcast. So we start out with a theme, and as I mentioned, this time it's going to be employment law. And then we give you a professional development takeaway. We give you our highly anticipated, wait what? This episode's shocking statistic. And we dive into a case study.
That's right, and this is a very special episode for us. We're so excited to host our VIP guest joining us at the bar. Iowa State Senator Nate Boulton will be joining us to discuss employment law and specifically workplace policies surrounding infectious disease in the workplace in the wake of the pandemic.
So as we shared, we normally have 4 different points that we go through, and the last one is normally a case study. What we have this time is a little bit different. We don't have a specific case that we want to bring to you today. What we hope to do is to alert you to the fact that in regard to infectious diseases, there are several cases that are still working their way through the legal system. We wanted to make you aware that this is an ongoing and probably constantly changing area of the law. There are cases that have been established that we felt were not really germane to what we're discussing today. They were kind of old, and so we just want to let you know that as we speak with our VIP guest, he will alert you to some things to just kind of keep your eye on. They're going to be coming through the system, and a little different take on our typical case study this episode.
Exactly. There is a bit of a gray area, as we all know, when it comes to infectious disease at the workplace. We experienced it during the COVID pandemic with state and federal laws kind of contradicting, or not necessarily contradicting, but not being streamlined to the situation. And so, as Lisa said, we thought it was a perfect opportunity to bring in a very important guest today. Iowa State Senator Nate Boulton is here to speak with us about employment law and specifically workplace policies surrounding infectious disease in the workplace in the wake of the pandemic, but also broadening the scope to other infectious diseases such as the flu or other diseases that may have been contracted at the workplace or somewhere else brought into the workplace. So we cannot wait to hear from him in regards to not a specific case, but multiple cases and things to keep in mind and consider as we navigate this path going forward. So let's start off with our leadership development takeaway. Lisa, what do we have for this episode?
Okay, thank you. Yes, this time we are going to review some tips that appeared in an article that was published by the Harvard Business Review. And it involves 6 science-backed ways that you can improve your well-being at work. And so these are just small things that will make a big difference. The key here is that you do need to practice them consistently. We feel like they're practical. We feel like it's nothing too crazy that you couldn't possibly work into your day. So we hope that these are helpful for you. The first one is to check in with yourself daily. Ask yourself, how am I doing today? How am I feeling? And then don't judge your answers or immediately try to fix how you're feeling. Just become aware of where you're at that point. The next one is to take a few short quality breaks during the day. And the key word here is quality. So this means doing something that helps you disconnect from work, take a break, refuel, recharge. Unfortunately, scrolling social media, not quality, not reading the news, So we really encourage you to get up, take a walk, preferably outside. It's not like 1,000 degrees or a blizzard, it is Iowa, but there's just mountains of research that shows it will boost your mood, it will improve your focus and your motivation to get out there, get that fresh air. It only has to be like 5 minutes, just get up, shake it off, move around. The next one is practice acceptance and focus on what you can control, right? So acceptance involves 2 steps. First, just acknowledging the situation with clarity, focusing on facts that you know to be true. And then secondly, identify one step that you could take to move forward with less stress and reduce the struggle. Haley, you got 3 more for us?
Sure do. Those were great. Thanks, Lisa. So another one would be to prioritize micro moments of connection with colleagues. So what does that mean? We're all starved for human connection, and after facing the years of the pandemic and isolation, it's really negatively impacted our well-being as a whole in the nation. As human beings, we're wired to connect. We're social, and studies show that social support and feeling connected improve mental health and reduce stress and anxiety. So maybe just take a couple minutes and prioritize asking your coworker how their weekend was or what they're looking forward to. It will have benefits to you that you don't even necessarily realize. Practicing gratitude is another great one, and it also counters your brain's negativity bias. So by practicing gratitude, you ask your brain to widen its lens and focus its attention on things that are positive, meaningful, or maybe even that you find comforting. So the goal isn't to deny the difficulties or challenges that you might be facing, but just remind yourself they're not the entirety of your life. One example would be to create a daily gratitude practice, which can be as simple as writing down 3 things you appreciate every morning or every evening. And then the last one that we have for you today is practice active rest outside of work. It's important to spend time outside of the workplace on something that you really enjoy. Spend time on maybe your favorite hobby, or dedicate time to reading or gardening. Try a new creative activity like watercoloring or writing. The key is to do something that actively fuels your energy and feeds the parts of you other than just your work self.
These, I think, are very helpful and practical, right? You don't have to go out and buy something new. You don't have to commit giant portions of your day to them. They're practical things you can do in just a few moments to really help recharge your inner battery. And so, as the cliche goes, you're not your job. Perhaps especially if you're passionate about your work, you still need to be intentional about doing things you enjoy outside of work. And overall, it's probably just going to help you be better while you're at work. So I think these are things that hopefully we can all put into practice in our daily lives, and will just increase our overall well-being.
100%. And Lisa and I actually have an example that happened today. We went to lunch and almost took our podcast script to practice during lunch, and then we thought, no, let's just go and enjoy our time away from the office, enjoy our lunch. And then we were able to come back and really dive in deep. So it worked out. Hopefully you find this valuable and can keep these as takeaways that you can implement right away in your personal and professional life. For a deeper dive into wellness, please check out the September issue of the Iowa Lawyer magazine. All authors and contributors to this issue are Iowa lawyers. But now, I think it's time for our
Wait, what? You know you love it. The episode's Wait, what? Shocking statistic. And yes, we're going to continue along with our theme of staying well at work. So what we are going to do is talk about the shocking statistics as we have kind of come through, for the most part, hopefully, the COVID-19 pandemic. This just blew my mind. According to the World Health Organization, in the United States alone, there are over 100 million confirmed cases of COVID, and that was as of August 16th of 2023. So, well, again, we hope and are grateful that this is slowing down. It is a number that continues to increase. And maybe even more shockingly, if you look at the global numbers, there are nearly 770 million confirmed cases. And again, those are just the ones that have been reported to your healthcare provider. So, undiagnosed cases or maybe others that we're unaware of would just make that number go higher. So we're headed into cold and flu season. Keep yourselves well, keep your colleagues well. And one thing that I just learned, this was really my biggest wait what, is that, and it goes back to July of 2021, long COVID has been added as a recognized condition that could result in disability under the Americans with Disability Act. So all of these were shocking statistics to me, and we again just encourage you all to stay well, stay safe, and be kind to your colleagues and help keep them well.
It has been very interesting because November 2021 issue of the Iowa Lawyer magazine, we had a feature article published on COVID vaccinations and all of the things that were happening. It was kind of a moving target at the time based on, how employers were dealing with it, employees coming to work, testing positive. And so we thought it might be good at this point to kind of reconnect with that and see, is it still a moving target? Are things kind of, more streamlined now? And so this allows us to introduce our VIP guest, Senator Nate Boulton, and leads us into our case study. And we want to talk a little bit more on why it's important to have workplace protections against any and all infectious diseases, expanding from being COVID-specific times to what's happening in the workplace today. We are thrilled to introduce you to Iowa State Senator, Drake University School of Law adjunct professor, and top employment lawyer in Iowa, attorney Nate Boulton. Nate, thank you so much for being our guest on the Join Us at the Bar podcast today.
Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Thanks.
All right, perfect. So the theme of this episode, obviously, is employment law, and then we also were discussing the current state of infectious diseases. We kind of referenced COVID, but obviously there's more than just COVID that is out there. We had seen a lot of state and federal laws enacted during the pandemic, and we're kind of curious as to where things stand today, where you see things hopefully moving forward in the future, both to keep employees safe and to help employers keep their employees safe. So what do you think about the status of things for employers and the workplace today?
Yeah, I think we learned a lot through the pandemic of how little we had been doing to mitigate the spread of infectious diseases in the workplace and how much catching up we needed to do now that we know more about how diseases spread, now that we have more information. And it was a rough transition. I think we all can remember how many different phases we felt like we went through during the pandemic, and that certainly is true with employment law. Responding to changes in guidance from the Centers for Disease Control, changes in guidance from state regulations and state law, and ultimately changes in legal liability for infectious diseases in places of business, both in terms of like retail and commercial businesses and restaurants, but also just within the workforce itself and workers' compensation law. So yeah, we learned a lot during the pandemic, and now in the aftermath of it, yeah, we can talk about how the rules have been set for COVID, but the real question is when the next major infectious disease spreads, whether that is a strain of the flu or something like COVID that we just completely off the radar disease that now is present in our society. What is going to happen when that takes hold? Hopefully we've learned enough to try to mitigate the spread of that on the front end. But as you look at some of those liability protections and workplace guidance, a lot of that was specific to COVID-19. So what does that mean for the next thing? And I think that's what a lot of employers and employees really are interested to see, if there is another outbreak, what's that going to look like?
Yeah.
Working in employment law and workers' compensation, what do you want working Iowans and employers to know about their rights surrounding illness in the workplace? And are there any cases that set precedent on this matter?
Yeah. In terms of workers' compensation, occupational diseases and infectious diseases aren't new in workers' compensation, right? We've had situations where workplace exposures to a serious infectious disease have resulted in benefits. The key questions are, what was the workplace exposure that caused this? Was it something that was imported into the workplace? Was it something that could have been also obtained through community spread? Identifying the cause of the infection obviously is an important step to establishing liability in workers' compensation. Then the second part is the entitlement to benefits. How has this infectious disease caused you to have maybe a temporary period of disability where you missed a time recovering from the illness, but then potential permanency. We've heard of long COVID, right? A disease that, for some people, COVID was a short-term infection and they got better. Some people have continued to have respiratory function decline. And so those types of long conditions can be permanent disability. But again, the key question is, was the exposure at work or in the community, and how do we determine that? That's a huge question. If it's something that is an infectious disease that's spread through bodily fluids, like a bloodborne disease, well, if you had a puncture wound at work and then have a bloodborne illness, that makes sense. We know where that happened.
Sure.
Something like flu or COVID, did you get it at the grocery store? Did you get it on the line at the factory? That's a little harder to tell. You can have medical opinions just like in any other injury situation where maybe medical providers agree to disagree on exactly how someone got infected, but that's going to be something that's weighed out by the facts. But ultimately, the real question is, if you're a worker, how do I connect the dots to where was my exposure? Where did this infection happen? And if it's work-related or not, if it is work-related, what are the effects of that? Do I have an entitlement to temporary disability while I'm off work, and any permanency for long, sustained conditions that permanently affect my health? And for employers, the best thing you can do is to prevent people from getting sick at work, right? Those things that we have learned through this pandemic of being able to have barriers for workers in tight quarters, and being able to have some separation and social distancing. Diseases spread in a lot of different ways. Seeing how you can mitigate the spread of disease in the workplace keeps your workforce healthier, which is, I think, something we all want.
And to kind of piggyback off of that, moving forward, with regard to any infectious disease, what do you think, is there anything that can be done legislatively or, that can be enacted? I think other states have kind of taken some proactive steps.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you see on the horizon here in Iowa?
Something that I think would be really helpful is paid family leave, and having a program that the state can get behind to give the opportunity for small and medium-sized employers to offer paid leave to employees without putting themselves in financial risk. Because we want people who are sick to stay home from work and not infect others. Some people just can't afford to make that decision and are sitting there trying to decide, all right, I'm sick, do I still try to go to work or not?
Yeah.
The only way I'm getting paid today is if I show up.
Yeah.
And so fighting through that. We don't want that. We want you to be able to stay home if you're sick to prevent the rest of the workforce from becoming sick. So things like paid family leave obviously are a real way to address that. Not only having a sick employee stay home, but if you have sick family members that you can take care of, go home, take care of them, and also get through your infectious period, your contagious period, while you're taking care of those children at home, and then come back to work. Again, ways to keep each other healthy on the front end, much better than trying to deal with permanent disability or temporary disability for workplace infections on the back end.
Right, and that's a great point. I mean, it seems to be being more long-sighted than short-sighted, right? Like these methods or these mitigation steps can pay long-term dividends for potentially, a short-term inconvenience,
Right.
but overall, just keeping people healthy and really stopping that snowball effect.
Right, looking back to the very beginnings of the pandemic, when we saw one of the hardest hitting strains, right? People who got sick, got really sick from that
Sure.
first strain, and it spread really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And what we saw were places that tried to stay open through the pandemic sometimes became overwhelmed. Too much of their workforce became infected and they forced to shut down because there just weren't workers available. What we'd rather see, preventing that infection from happening through that workplace in the first place. If you're sick, you're staying home and the employer stays open and other people are able to continue working. That's the ideal.
Yeah, I like that. I think that paid family leave is a wonderful concept.
Yeah. And other states are doing it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we can get on board with some people that have found ways to succeed with programs like that.
And beneficial for employers and employees.
Correct.
Yeah, win-win.
Win-win. We like that.
Yeah. Any other thoughts you'd like to share with us today?
I think the biggest thing is, keep monitoring the changes in the law. If you're an employer watching this, again, keep watching. We're seeing COVID cases kind of, in terms of not cases of infection, but actually litigated cases
Sure, working
coming
their way.
through the court system, and we're
Okay.
learning more about some of those bright line tests. Again, obviously in terms of public exposures and public risk for restaurants, there's pretty serious liability limits that were put in place by the legislature. Pretty hard to prove those claims, but the workplace exposures are a little less clear right now. Having those guideposts come out, I think are going to be good educational points for us going forward.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining
Yes.
us, Nate. We really appreciate you being here, and thank you for enlightening us on an update of what's happening. And like he said, keep a watch on what's happening and the legislative session coming up. And for any employment attorneys, it's very important to be up to date on what policies are in place today. So thank you, Nate. We really appreciate your time. We know
Yeah.
you're busy and could not appreciate it more that you made time to be here with us and join us at the bar.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.
Well, we hate to leave you. We've enjoyed this so much and hope that you have as well. And now it's time for this episode's host takeaways. So Lisa, what were some of your big takeaways?
I think for me, I'm gonna pull just one of those professional development tips, and it was a very good reminder to me, the piece on gratitude. Life is hard, days are hard. If you could just find one thing to be grateful for, right? Like, do you have a roof over your head? Do you have running water? Do you have food on your table? It could be as basic as just acknowledging the fact that hopefully your basic needs are being met. And there's 1,000 other things to be grateful for as well. But just focusing on gratitude, I think, can really just change your mindset, change your attitude as to how you're looking at a situation or overall circumstances. So I think my biggest, that's helpful. Like, I'm gonna try and just incorporate that more into my day-to-day. So just gratitude and being grateful.
I love that. Yes, and it's good it kind of shifts your mind out of that negativity bias to be grateful, more positive. And speaking of, just want to say again, we're very grateful for you, our
Yes.
subscribers and listeners. Thank you. You'll definitely be one of the 3 on our list.
Yes.
And my takeaway from this episode was realizing that long COVID is officially considered a disability in today's age.
Yeah. I have no idea.
And this is interesting to me because it kind of broadens the conversation on what is a disability, A lot of times, you know, you might see somebody in a wheelchair or you see the actual disability, but there are a lot of people with disabilities that you do not see, such as long COVID. And so it's very good to be mindful of that.
All right, that does bring us to the end of this episode. Again, if you're a first-time listener, we're so happy to have you. If you're one of our ongoing faithful listeners, great to have you back. We're grateful for all of you. We would like to remind you, for a more serious take on the law, please check out the Iowa Lawyer magazine. We also distribute an electronic weekly e-newsletter, the Iowa Lawyer Weekly. Both of those are available on the Iowa State Bar Association's website, which you can find at www.iowabar.org.
Please submit your ideas for topics, or maybe there's someone you'd like to see us welcome on the Join Us at the Bar podcast in the future.
Yes.
We would love to hear from you. So please email us at communications@iowabar.org. And don't forget, please click that subscribe button. If you enjoy the content or get any value out of our podcast, please help us by subscribing so that we can continue to create this content for you.
Yes, we look forward to seeing you again in 2 months. And for now, we would just like to say thank you for joining us at the bar.
We're here for you.